Hello, my name is Dion Riley, and I did my project on literacy and special education. So I interviewed a special education teacher at my school and focused specifically on asking questions and having conversations about standards and how they differ between how they play out in the special ed classroom versus in the general education elementary classroom. So first I asked about the types of literacy curriculum that this educator used in special education. And she described using Really Great Reading, which she has two different programs. Countdown is one that is primarily used for those very beginning reading foundational skills like phonemic awareness, letter names and sounds, and making those connections between letter sounds and manipulating sounds, and then the connection to then print. And then Blast really is more of a focus on the individual phonics skills and then using those phonics skills in text reading. So the program also has like decodable passages to work on those phonics skills and then eventually more into the fluency skills as well. And then another curriculum that is used is Reading Mastery. And that one is pretty skill specific. And she said she uses that one sometimes, but mostly the Really Great Reading materials are the ones that are primarily used. I know those ones are very hands-on. There's letter kits where kids can build words, and then there's writing components to some of the more advanced ones where they're working on those spelling to reading skills. And then there's online components as well that include videos and little activities for students. So it's very skill specific, but also pretty comprehensive for phonics, fluency, phonemic awareness. So then the literacy curriculum that right now there are actually two being used because our district in the elementary level is piloting Amplify, which is a comprehensive K-4 reading program that is more based on the science of reading. So that is the first year for that, and at my specific school, that's just kindergarten and fourth grade that are piloting that. And then Wonders, which is more of the balanced literacy program. So again, it's comprehensive. It focuses on all the elements of literacy and all standards in that. And that right now is being used first, second, and third grade. For formative assessments in special education, FastBridge, as many educators in Iowa know, is the main tool to really chart and graph that progress, especially that's used for students in special education because it's good to have that data and to see where they're growing and where they still need to work on. So when I interviewed and talked about FastBridge with her, she talked about based on the grade level and the skill level of her students, they're either using weekly fluency probes to track accuracy and fluency growth, or weekly letter sound probes, or weekly sight word probes. And she uses those and takes notes on them. There's a component where you can add notes, which is super helpful. So she can kind of make her own adjustments to her teaching as she notices these specific things that maybe kids struggle on. She mentioned a specific thing with a lot of students, and I've noticed this too, that they use the capital I without the top and the bottom. So a lot of kids think it's the lowercase l. So she talked about how she then can use that data of if students are misreading that as an L instead of an I. She uses that as like a little maybe mini lesson of looking at different kinds of print and how different letters look different in different texts. Then for formative assessments in the general education classroom, the assessments are similar. I know in special ed, she said more, she may have like a second or third grade student, which would typically be doing fluency weekly probes, may still be needing to work on word blending, so they might be on nonsense words or even sight words at like a first grade level. So in the general ed classroom, the students more typically are doing the the probe that matches what their grade level is on. So for second grader, they're doing the second grade reading passages for that fluency CBMR. For K1, typically it's letter sounds, sight words, CBMR. CBMR for first grade is a little bit dependent on when students are mastering those sight words or nonsense words. And then second through fourth grade is primarily CBMR. There is a comprehension component, but I know talking to other teachers in general ed, it's not a super great way to track comprehension, but I have not personally explored that a lot. So I just know that not a lot of classroom teachers are using that. And then also with the new Amplify program, they do actually build in that formative assessment piece within the instruction time, the daily instruction time. So I know I've talked to kindergarten teachers, and they've showed me some of those formative assessments, and it's really quick skill checks like letter sounds or isolating the beginning sound in a word. So that is what that looks like more in general education. Then literature versus informational text. So those are two different styles of text that students come across in elementary. And in special education, she doesn't really use a lot of literature, and primarily because the first thing before students can really work on even the fluency or comprehension of text is to be able to be accurate at decoding and having those solid beginning reading skills. So she talked about, the passages that she uses mostly are those decodable phonics-based texts in tandem with the curricula that she's using. So there isn't as much literature in that because it's really explicit, focused on the skill deficits that they're working on. The use of informational text, though, is a little more widely used. She said especially when students have an IEP goal, specifically working on comprehension. So there's a lot of opportunities there to be reading, nonfiction texts and working on finding text evidence and using different features to answer questions and make sure that they're comprehending the text. Then in the general ed classroom, there's a lot of use of literature. For example, even just daily read alouds. Younger kids, it might be picture books. Older students, more like reading novels. And both Wonders and Amplify have a big component of reading literature. And I know for Amplify, they have so their program is broken into skills and knowledge, and the knowledge component focuses very heavily on literature and also informational text, but really literature too, and working on being able to listen and comprehend and talk about different components of, setting, those kinds of things, using those literature and like fairy tale stories and stuff for younger grades to work on those skills. They also use a lot of informational text, again, in both of the different reading curriculums that are used at my school. So then I asked her about, the special education teacher, about the use or the focus on the foundational skills versus more comprehension and text feature skills. And she said that really most of her time is spent on those foundational reading skills, because if she's jumping straight into working on comprehension and text features and students are not able to decode words to read passages on their own, then that's kind of where she needs to start. She's always going to that, beginning building block. She talked about, sometimes she has second graders and she realizes, they are actually really lacking in their phonemic awareness skills, which is why they're having trouble then even decoding, because they're not hearing those sounds correctly or understanding that you can manipulate sounds and change sounds to make new words. So she really does focus most of her time on those foundational skills. Comprehension and text features are then addressed for students that have a specifically written IEP goal for comprehension. So that is kind of her focus. And really, for students with IEPs, it is individualized education plans. So what is then written as the goals based on, testing and observation of students, that is more the focus than in the general education class, where they have to cover a wide variety of skills and materials. So she's focusing specifically on what her students need to be successful. Then I already said a little bit, but in the general ed classroom, they focus a lot more on both sectors of reading, the foundational and the comprehension and higher order level thinking. In the lower elementary grades, they do spend a lot more time in those foundational skills because they're building those, building up that knowledge and skill practice, but as well a lot of listening comprehension and beginning comprehension. In upper grades, there is a lot more focus on comprehension and that reading to learn instead of learning to read. Especially, I would say the phonological awareness in second, well, probably even more in third and fourth grade is less common. Phonics is still prevalent, but again, getting to that third and fourth grade, it's more focused on comprehension and learning than it is on real specific components of phonics skills. So then I asked her about reading level of her students in special education. In our school, we use Accelerated Reader, which is a little bit similar if you know like Lexile or other programs like that. It's kind of a motivational and way to track students' independent reading. So there are thousands of books that are in the Accelerated Reading, or we call it AR program. And so students are able to then read whatever text that interests them that are at their level. And then they take short comprehension quizzes on it. And as they succeed and master then those comprehension quizzes, they can, after a certain number, they can move up to the next level, because if they're able to answer questions and understand them independently, then that is a key that they're ready to continue to progress in the levels in their independent reading. So in special education, she talked how it's really just very specifically dependent on the individual students. But she said if she had to kind of give an average summary of all of her students that she works with for special ed in reading, most of the students read around 2 grade levels behind where their actual grade level is. But then, however, on the positive side of that, 75% of her students are reading grade level passages for their weekly CMBR, so that weekly fluency probe. So like a third grader would typically, 75% of her students would be reading a third grade passage versus a third grader that might need to be reading like the second or first grade passages. Then in the general ed classroom, again, it's very student specific on where they're at in their independent reading levels versus what their grade level is. But approximately half of students in a given grade level are reading within their grade level's text. So if they're a second grader and it's end of November, they may be reading more like a 2.0, 2.1 all the way to 2.8, 2.9. So anywhere in there is the grade levels text. And then about half of the students then are reading more 2 or plus years above grade level and or 2 plus years below grade level. So the classroom teachers really have quite a mix of levels of independent reading among their students. So then talking about writing in special education, when I talked to her about what she sees mostly in writing difficulty, she talked a lot about letter formation and making that connection between letters, sounds, and words. So knowing that you can hear the sounds, you write them out as letters, and when you put those together, that makes words. So a lot of working on that. Spelling accuracy as well, learning how to connect those phonics skills from reading and understanding what they look like when you see them on a page to then being able to write and spell them accurately using those same rules. And then a lot with mechanics, so spacing, punctuation, capitalization, commas, all those different things. Currently, she does not have a actually specific writing curriculum for her students that have an IEP for writing, but that's something that is in the works. So she said she had one training so far on a new writing curriculum, but hasn't yet, the district hasn't yet gone through with purchasing it or having the full curriculum available for special ed. Then in the general ed classroom, mechanics is also a big difficulty. Just a lot of students have trouble remembering the proper spacing and punctuation, and then going along with that, complete sentences. What does it look like to have a complete sentence? What parts do you need to make it a sentence and not just a phrase? And then going further, they're focusing on a little bit more advanced writing in the elements of paragraph, different types of writing styles, narrative, persuasive, opinion, etc. And they do have a couple curricula. The younger students are using more